Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce RTX 4080 Super in the Elder Stutters IV Oblivion Remastered. This one is the Founders Edition model of the card. I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU-Z, and over on the left, I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 7 9800X 3D and 32GB of RAM. Let's get into it, shall we? First up, let's go over the settings as usual, and I'm starting at the 4K resolution. We're also going to test this one at 1440p and 1080p as well, and I'm using the high settings preset with hardware ray tracing turned on high as well. This is really intensive right here, so I'll also try it with the software ray tracing as well a little bit later. And right now we're using DLSS here with 20% sharpness, no frame generation, and that's about it. Let's do this. And here we have it, guys. 4080 Super at 4K resolution, getting around 40 frames per second. And by the way, I know some of you are probably already typing, where is the epic settings or ultra settings preset? Why didn't you test it with the 4080 Super? Well, that's way more intensive. Like the 4090, which is a good bit faster than the 4080 Super, was only able to achieve 50-something FPS at 1440p maximum settings with ultra settings, you know? So yeah, it's probably not adequate for this tier of performance of GPU, unfortunately. And second, high settings look basically the same as ultra settings in this title. There's no major differences. But yeah, guys, you're not losing anything in terms of visual fidelity, in my opinion, by playing on high compared to ultra settings, and you gain like, what, 5 to 10 frames per second here and there. A little bit higher sometimes, actually. And this way, we can actually play at 30 plus frames per second, apparently. Let's go in this direction. I haven't gone in this direction yet. We're always going in the opposite direction, so I went to see what else is here. Like, there's something interesting over there, for example, kind of like an old church. There's also a little bit of a castle going on over there, or house, or whatever that is. Yeah, let's check it out, shall we? Also, I am overriding DLSS in the Nvidia app, by the way, so we're using DLSS for override here for a little bit less ghosting and less pixelation with DLSS enabled, or DLEA. It makes it look a little bit better while losing like 1 FPS, so that's definitely the way to go, I think. Let's keep on going over here. You can see this big structure, interesting. Oh, hello there. There's a guy here, actually. Okay, goodbye. Thank you. And he has a big sword, so I actually want that. Oh yes, this is a long sword. That's exactly what I wanted, guys, because somebody told me that the ghosting is unbelievably bad when using long swords. And over here, well, I'm not really seeing any ghosting whatsoever. Good stuff, you know. So DLSS is doing a really good job as usual. Looks beautiful, looks very sharp as well, but I mean 43 FPS probably not what you want coming from an RTX 4080 Super, right? So let's stop it right there and let's try to make it a little bit better. I could use DLSS Frame Generation, for example, but that will only improve things up to like 70-ish frames per second, and with the baseline that we were getting previously, 30s, 40s, there is quite a bit of input lag that's noticeable. Actually, it's surprisingly better than what I was expecting, honestly, but there's still a little tiny bit of input lag compared to the native stuff, so I wouldn't really utilize the frame generation over DLSS at 4K resolution. I think probably the sweet spot might be the quality DLSS here, maybe plus frame generation as well. We'll try it later, but yeah, DLSS bumps things up from 40 frames per second all the way up into the 60s, so if you want a 60 average experience here in this title, you can get that with DLSS quality, and it's DLSS 4 as well. The noise is still a little bit noticeable here, even with quality DLSS. Usually with DLSS 4, the quality preset, DLSS quality, is very similar to the native AA stuff, but here, well, yeah, this game suffers from a lot of noise and pixelation issues. Still, if you're not really looking for it and moving sideways like this, you can't really notice much ghosting or motion blur happening. Also, I'm not sure if you've been noticing, but whenever we're running and looking up and then I look down, it has this little weird bug that can't really replicate it right now. Yes, there we go. This is it. So that's not a stutter. It's just a bug inside of the game, guys. No problems. All right. What do you want? Oh, boy. Oh, wait a second. This sword actually sucks a little bit, because the other one killed these guys instantly. This one doesn't. Even though I feel the graphics don't justify the performance in this title. There's a huge thing over there. Wait, what the heck? There's the little animation issue again, by the way. But yeah, the graphics don't justify the performance in this title. It should perform better, you know, but at least if you have something like a 4080 Super, 5070 Ti, 4080, 40 or 5080 as well, which is a little bit faster than this, of course. That shouldn't really drop from 60 FPS actually using these settings. Yeah, you're good to go. This game will run absolutely great. Now, I think it's probably time for us to stop it right there and enable some frame generation. Once again, the baseline that we have here is really adequate for us to enable the DLSS frame generation. And now, instead of having, I'm trying to notice a little bit of ghosting here. Yeah, there's some pixelation around the sword there with the trees on the background, but no ghosting really. So that's good. And now we achieve 100 plus frames per second consistently, guys. It might drop here and there in very dense forest areas and stuff, but I feel like this is definitely the way to go if you want to achieve a high refresh rate experience while having really good graphics at the same time. So no complaints here, honestly. It still feels really responsive. I can't bring up the Nvidia overlay anymore, by the way. That used to work previously, but then they updated the game and now it doesn't work, unfortunately. But from what I tested with other GPUs when that was working, the frame generation only bumps the input latency up by like 5 milliseconds or so. That's basically unperceivable here with 100 FPS plus. So it works really well once again. Here we go, we're almost there. Gnoll Mountain, and there's a little camp over here. Interesting. Let's check this out. Is there some food for us to eat? No? Oh, there is venison. Nice, I will definitely steal that. And there is a gray robe. I'm robbing this person. I feel bad now. Ooh, lots of food actually over here. Meat. I like how the longsword now has a little bit of frost over it. That's really nice attention to detail right there, guys. Not sure if that was present on the previous game as well from 2006 or 2005. So should we try this out? You know, no, okay. I need to unlock that first. I have no idea how to do that. I've just been running around the world and checking out FPS, of course, not really playing the game, you know. Oh, there's another little campfire over here without fire now. Okay. And there's a chest as well. Look at this. There's a key for that thing, I think. So maybe we can actually enter that. Although I think it's going to be very small of an area, so not very good for testing, I guess. Yeah, this gets way higher FPS inside. But, well, we can see a little bit of a different scenario, different lighting as well with that lumen stuff. Alright, so I just loaded another save here. We're near this city area, which is pretty intensive, actually. Goodbye, sir. Thank you. And you too. Goodbye. Okay. So it's dropping into the 100s at the moment, and whenever that happens, especially into the 90s, you can start noticing quite a bit of added input lag, although it's still more than acceptable, in my opinion, and more than great. And inside of the city, it's the same thing. Lower 100s, high 90s, I guess. Yeah, guards are shooting at us. This save game is cursed. Low 90s at times. And over here is usually where it drops the most. Tons of stutters as well. Yeah, 80-something frames per second. So the baseline FPS would be about half of what we're getting now over here with the frame generation enabled. And you get pretty much the same input lags as 40-ish frames per second sometimes. Which is not bad, again, because we do have that... come on, the Nvidia Reflex enabled, and it's doing a good job at reducing the input lag as well. So this feels totally fine to me. It feels really smooth whenever it's not stuttering, you know, which is about 50% of the time. It also is stuttering less than the RTX 4090 did back when I tested that a few days ago, and the 5090 as well, because now we have a new Nvidia driver which actually fixed most of the stuttering issues, or at least driver-related stuttering issues. So this time around, the stutters that we see here are just game-related, traversal stuttering and stuff like that from UE5 and bad optimization from the developers, and not really like driver driver-related stuttering, which we got a lot of with those previous GPUs that I mentioned. Now, what about the 1440p resolution? You know what, guys? There's actually no need for us to disable Lumen hardware ray tracing and use software ray tracing instead on low. That looks a little bit worse, you know, and the 4080 Super can definitely render this with the help of some DLSS, of course, even at 4K resolution. But yeah, it's totally fine, so I'll still try it at 4K, but I wouldn't really play with software ray tracing instead with this card, unless you really want to get like 60 plus FPS 100% of the time with DLSS quality at 4K resolution without the use of frame generation. But FG actually did work really well, so just use that, in my opinion. You can actually have all of the bells and whistles enabled with this GPU. That's quite nice. Now, at 1440p, high settings, you can see it's not dropping from 60 frames per second anymore. That's really cool as well. It's also good to see, and a lot better than the RTX 5070 that I tested a couple of days ago, you know. That GPU was getting 50 to 60 frames per second. The 9070, the RX GPU from AMD, was doing like 5 FPS faster than the RTX 5070, so still not 60 plus. But here the 4080 Super, given that it is actually very similar to a 5070 Ti, so quite a lot faster than 5070, it does much better of a job here with the LAA enabled and stuff, so native resolution at 1440p, no problems whatsoever here, as long as you don't use the ultra settings preset, which again puts even the 4090 to its knees, which is absolutely ridiculous. What did I hear here? What? Hello? Is this the plant doing this? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the plant was making noise. Interesting. But all right, if all you want to do is 60 plus FPS at 1440p, this is the way, my friends. There's no need to drop down settings. There's no need to utilize DLSS quality, which doesn't look very good, especially at these lower resolutions. At 4K, it's completely fine, in my opinion. But here you start noticing major issues with the image quality and the pixelation and the noise. It's very pixelated, unfortunately. And that's on the developers, you know. They should definitely optimize their game a little bit better, and the visuals as well, to take advantage of the DLSS and upscalers properly, because as it stands, DLSS is the best one that you can use here in this title, but it still has major flaws visually, unfortunately. Not that a lot of people will notice them, because I think people just don't really care, most of them at least. But yeah, there are some major issues with the picture quality here when using upscaling. And over here, it is dropping very close to 60 FPS, and from 60 FPS, 57 right there, nothing that a little bit of an overclock wouldn't offset, you know? Or maybe just use the frame generation over this, which is exactly what I will do, because this is a good baseline to enable it. And then you can get buttery smooth results. Basically the same as 4K with DLSS quality plus frame generation. Yeah, as you can see, 100 FPS now. Very smooth experience. I can't say very smooth experience. Like, the average FPS, the FPS that we're seeing here most of the time, and me turning the camera around like this, it actually feels really smooth, but then there are stutters every 10 seconds or 20 seconds or so. But hey, guys, in terms of ghosting, motion blurs, and stuff like that caused by the frame generation, I can't really notice anything wrong with the picture, so the frame gen in this title works really well, once again, and I would definitely recommend people to enable FG if you have an Nvidia GPU, or other GPUs. If you have a 60 FPS baseline with a few drops into the 50s, enable frame gen over native resolution, and that's going to be a great experience, better than without the frame generation enabled. So there's that, my friends. So inside of this big forest where we were previously, you know, dropping into like the lower 100s, it gets the same FPS as inside of this city, which we have been to already in this video. So that's what you can expect on the lowest side of things. And in terms of input lag, then it's really good, guys. Again, this game's input lag with Nvidia GPUs, because it's using the latest frame generation model, it has really low input lag, to the point where I feel like if you have 45 FPS as a baseline, you can also enable frame gen, and you will achieve higher input lag, of course, but it's gonna feel really good anyways. and super playable in my opinion, and given it is a single player title as well, it's obviously very playable here with the frame gen enabled, even with a little bit of input lag added, but here with 100 plus FPS all of the time, it's barely noticeable, honestly. I doubt most people would be able to tell the difference side by side with a computer with frame gen and another one without frame gen in terms of input latency. Also, another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that power utilization on Nvidia GPUs. It's really low, it's not hitting TDP, and we've seen this happening with some other titles as well, particularly UE5 titles. I don't know why that is. Maybe the games just aren't really that well optimized for these Nvidia GPUs. Maybe the drivers aren't really there, because recently they've had a ton of driver-related issues. Or maybe it's just another case of these GPUs are much more efficient than their TDPs say. So back when I tested the RTX 4090, for example, when it released, I tested it at 4K resolution and it barely hit the 450 watt TDP. It was mostly 150 watts lower than that, and that was normal behavior, because I contacted Nvidia about it to ask if that was normal, you know. They said it was absolutely normal. Let's stop it there though for 1440p resolution. I'm not going to go back to this resolution because there's no need to, really. It's a very nice experience here. And now for those of you after super high refresh rate experiences, 1080p resolution with a 4080 Super. I guess most people don't have a 1080p monitor with a card like this. I would highly recommend you to upgrade your monitor if you do, but you know, it's personal preference as well. A lot of people also enjoy playing at 1080p resolution and don't see the point of upgrading to a higher resolution monitor, even with a card like a 4080 Super. And it's totally fine. It's personal preference once again, but you're losing out on a lot of pixels there by not going at least 1440p. And I feel like 4K is probably adequate here, because 4K with performance DLSS usually looks better than 1440p, and a lot of titles do have DLSS as well, so I would rather play at 4K DLSS performance than 1440p native resolution on a native 1440p monitor. It looks better to me, at least. Now let's go outside on the open world again, which stutters more, start counting our FPS, and at 1080p resolution, I mean, there's not much to it. Oh my god, this traversal stuttering, dude. Jesus. 10 FPS, 1% lows. Amazing. Amazing. It was probably just loading it since we hopped into the open world just now, but yeah, that will happen from time to time. But yeah, at 1080p resolution, there's no need to use AI trickery like the frame generation and super resolution and stuff like that to achieve 60 plus. It's always going to stay at 60 plus, well over 60 plus, obviously. It's like, what, 80 plus FPS all of the time, I guess, even with hardware ray tracing enabled on high. So no problems. Let's go third person, actually, see if we can spot a little bit more noise here. Yeah, it's not too bad since we're utilizing DLAA once again. No super resolution being used here. It's just the anti-aliasing from DLSS. That's what DLAA stands for, Deep Learning Anti-Aliasing. And a lot of people ask me, where is the native resolution testing in these videos? I mean, this is running native 1080p. It's running 1920 by 1080 resolution, just with the added anti-aliasing from DLSS on top of it. All right. So, yeah, it is a little bit more intensive than native resolution without DLAA. I'm actually going to showcase that, why not? 82, 83 FPS here with DLAA enabled. And now let's turn off all of the anti-aliasings here, and it's going to look terrible, yep, as you can see. And it gets 90 FPS, so there is quite a bit of a difference there, about 8% of performance loss compared to the native resolution stuff, but, I mean, this looks awful. Look at the amount of shimmering. Look at the amount of noise. Look at the flickering. Yeah. So, don't do this. And the worst part is, even if you use TAA, now it's super soft. It looks like we're running the game at 720p resolution, honestly. It's really soft. There's a ton of ghosting around the sword there, as you can see. And then, if we use TSR, which is the best of the anti-aliasings, aside from FSR native, actually, I think, the ghosting is gone, but the picture is still really soft. It's awful, guys. This is terrible. And now we're getting, what, 84 frames per second here with TSR? And what if we enable the LAA again? We get 84. So it's the same. It's the same intensiveness, yet DLAA looks way sharper than TSR or TAA. Also, I've seen at least a couple of comments saying that we should use TSR in this title, even if you have an RTX GPU. No, don't do that, okay? It was so soft. Did you see that? I mean, it's on YouTube with the compression and stuff. It's gonna wreck it, but I spent a good few seconds there, stopped, standing still, you know, and you could tell that it's so soft without DLAA, guys. Anyway, that's about it. I guess you could enable frame generation as well to achieve 144 frames per second plus or something like that, 130 plus probably all of the time. Yeah, that's about it. With stuttering, of course, that's not going anywhere, but yeah, buttery smooth experience right here. Aside from the stutters again, you can max out at 144 Hz 1080p monitor. So I stop it right there for 1080p resolution. I'm gonna go back to no frame generation, and we're gonna disable the hardware ray tracing now. I'm gonna set the Lumen software ray tracing to low, so we have the lowest possible ray tracing experience. And now I will restart the game as well to make sure it fully applies. And here we have it. So we gained a good few frames per second in this area, guys. We had like 40 frames per second here, dropping into the 30s actually, looking in this direction previously with the hardware ray tracing set to high. Now we're up to 50 frames per second, that's quite nice. Frame time graph might be a little bit more stable as well, but we gotta walk around for a little bit longer to check that out properly. But yeah, it's much closer to 60 FPS as well, as you can see. Going up to like the mid-50s, not terrible of an experience. And in terms of reflections and stuff, it actually looks really similar. I think the water looks a little bit blender actually, in a way. And sometimes with some specific lighting during the day, it can also look quite a lot washed out compared to what we saw previously with the hardware ray tracing set to high. But I can see how some people will actually prefer this experience, given that it has quite a bit of higher FPS, you know, like 10 frames per second higher than previously. And well, now adding like DLSS quality on top of this should put it above 60 FPS 100% of the time. Maybe with the occasional drop here and there from 60. I'm gonna go to the forest area in just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think this is quite a bit smoother in terms of frame time graph compared to previously, though. So, if you hate stutters, which I do, maybe have the lumen set to low and software ray tracing as well. Because, yeah, those bigger spikes will still happen from time to time when loading in new areas and stuff. Those are the traversal stutters, once again, baked into UE5, basically. But aside from that, we don't see those minor spikes that are still noticeable in the graph as often. Like these ones over there. It actually showed up there in the graph, but wasn't as noticeable for sure. Maybe it's because the frame rate is also higher, I don't know. But let's keep on going here. This is the forest area at the moment, getting 60s, 63, 61, 60, 50s. Okay, so it can still drop from 60 FPS, although only slightly. Also, this time around, it's consuming a little bit more power on that GPU. That's great to see. So it's utilizing it a little bit more efficiently, I guess. But yeah, this is really nice. Even with a couple of drops here and there from 60 frames per second, I think a lot of people would still enjoy the hell out of this with these graphics over here. Now, the thing is, you still need to use frame generation to achieve 60 plus 100% of the time, and when you do enable that, it drops into the 100s, it probably drops into the 90s sometimes, so it is a very similar experience to the high hardware ray tracing enabled with DLSS set to quality plus frame generation as well. So over here, a 10 FPS difference isn't as noticeable, whereas the lighting from the high hardware ray tracing is actually a little bit noticeable in some occasions. But yeah, you'd get like 10 less FPS with hardware ray tracing on, and I think it's worth taking that hit with the frame generation because it will look better overall, and stay just as smooth, you know? I can't really tell much of a difference between 100 and 110 frames per second in terms of smoothness. Maybe there's a little bit more responsiveness to be had by having those extra 10 frames per second, but we're not talking about 70 FPS with frame generation to 80 FPS, where that makes a big difference. We're talking about 100 to 110. And inside of here, previously we dropped to like 87 frames per second, looking in this direction, with some guards shooting at us and stuff, and now it's dropping to like 104, 105. Not with the same lighting though, but there is a little bit of a measurable difference there. That doesn't really make much of a difference in the end, in terms of gameplay, if you're playing this
Leave me alone.
game.
By the nines. Assault, assault.
Goodbye, sir. I won't leave you alone. I think this is Bob, guys. He looks like Bob, right? Resist arrest. I don't care. Shut up. Shut up. How come you can see me? I'm crouched. All right. Okay, now we have a proper comparison here because the lighting is much more similar to what it was before, I think. And now we got some guards here. Come on. Come on. Yeah, it's kind of the same, actually. 100-ish frames per second. So now it doesn't drop from 100 FPS. So that's been it for this one, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And, well, let me know what your experiences are being with the RTX 4080 Super in this game. And if you were wondering if you should buy the game with this card, well, you can. I don't like to support developers that don't optimize games. But, hey, game is playable and it can be enjoyable here. The stutter is just way too much, though. There are mods for it, though. Maybe we should check that out a little bit later in another video. But I feel like the developers are the ones that need to fix the game, not the community. But it's Bethesda after all, so yeah. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.